Simple syrup?
Sure. That is the neatest presentation of a cup of coffee I've seen in a little while.
It's handsome. All right. This is Dan Stone. You're listening to the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John and Pete.
Dan Stone is the publisher and founder of Radio Silence. And if you guys aren't hip, go look at their online publication, which is maintainradiosilence.com. A forum for people to express their thoughts on rock and roll when their thoughts are really literary. I mean, it's a place for literary nerds and rock and roll nerds
Absolutely.
to meet.
Yeah, it is that. Well, first, thank you guys for coming here to Oakland and having me on the show. I know it was a bit of a hassle to set this up, and I'm psyched to be here with you. Yeah, with Radio Silence, it's a magazine we started about 5 years ago focused on literature and rock and roll. We just sort of put it on hiatus, but we're doing some events still now and then. The idea of it originally was that we'd create a magazine focused on both those art forms, on literature and rock and roll, both on how they intersect and also on each of them individually. So we have writers and musicians contribute to the magazine, all by invitation. Some interviews, short stories, poems, essays, all sorts of stuff, conversations between musicians and writers. So we put together this print magazine. We did a few big issues of that. We've got all our online stuff is free. We've got, 20 plus issues online. And then we did a bunch of events bringing together musicians and writers, and we were putting together a podcast also that we kind of shelved for now.
That's highly unfortunate for fans of the medium.
Oh, man, I'm a huge fan of it. I worked in the medium for years, and that's partly why I wanted to get back into it with Radio Silence. Our original vision was that we would have those four components sort of working together: print, digital, live, and a broadcast component. And we were laying them out one at a time. But the problem with it, like a lot of ambitious creative endeavors, surprisingly in a town like this that has so much money, the problem is it's hard to raise real money to get something like that off the ground. So we did it for 5 years with a volunteer staff of 10 people. Everyone had second jobs. I bartended for the first several years. I was working on Radio Silence, and people were, one of our people worked at SF Jazz full-time. Another person worked in bars and cafes in the city. Our art director is in New York, worked for Victoria's Secret during the time he was on Radio Silence. We had a great dedicated group, but we kind of hit the point where you either had to raise enough money to make it real, publish regularly, pay people. I mean, we paid our contributors, but we never paid staff, and we couldn't get there. So we put it on hold for now. Hibernation. Hopefully
It'll be a winter from which you recover with heavy rejuvenation, because if you guys are listening to us and looking at maintainradiosilence.com, you see that the content certainly is there, but I'm holding a copy of the publication, and it is not what I expected. It is a piece of literature. It is it's a book.
Yeah, it's a book.
Multi-volume book.
Yeah, and you publish twice a year. So if anybody's expecting a magazine, they go, wow, that's a twice-a-year magazine. That must be special.
Yeah.
But it really is.
Well, now we're publishing never, but when we were putting it actually ended up coming out about once a year. But yeah, we pulled out a measuring tape and measured, first edition hardcovers, 6 by 9 inches, and said, let's turn this into something that when people are done reading it, they'll put it on their shelf next to their favorite books. They won't recycle it. And that's partly why it looks like a book, because we want people to keep it. So there's no advertisements. We tried to only include material that wouldn't get dated. So we don't really have news or reviews of new records. It's stuff that's sort of timeless material. That's what we were going for with the print.
It's also why you bound it the way you did, too. You don't have a staple on the spine because you want it to be something that looks like a volume you want to keep.
Yeah. It was expensive to make because we've got this embossed cover that's supposed to look like a record label. We spent money on it, and that's partly why you got to raise a bunch of money to keep something like that going.
Yeah.
But,
You spent money on the tactile experience. And I think that some of our listeners out there are going to be scratching their heads about it, but hopefully many of our listeners will think, man, nobody's doing that.
Yeah.
You can go back and buy the back issues if you go to maintainradiosilence.com.
We've got them.
So go there and do that. Really do yourself a favor and do that, because what you're going to get in the mail is something that you're going to hold in your hand. You're going to smell it. and it's like the feel of an anticipated book.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the reviews that are in here, because they're not really reviews. What they are reflections of emotions about pieces of work that are really brilliant. And I started reading with, I don't know, I guess maybe not the proper, I didn't have both feet on the ground, you know, and I was kind of flighty when I started reading the content. And then it very quickly became obvious to me that I had to stop what I was doing and concentrate.
Yeah.
Because this was some serious shit. This wasn't to be toyed with. It was something that was going to change my day. You know, and it's worthy of really spending your time and your mental energy and digging in, because the stuff that's in here is literature.
Yeah. Well, thanks, John. I appreciate that. Yeah, we're happy with it. We collaborated with a lot of really talented people.
Yeah, that is absolutely clear. One of the other things that I did was I went looking around for you in the digital world, and I found a clip on YouTube of a talk that you did at Google with Daniel Handler.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about that because that was fun.
Yeah.
You guys got everybody at Google drunk.
Yeah, that was our plan. You know, I do a lot of fun stuff with that guy, Daniel Handler, who writes the Lemony Snicket books.
He's a wildly interesting dude.
He is great. He's one of the funniest guys alive. He's so talented, so nice. Everything I do with him somehow involves booze.
All right.
It's just how it is. I used to be a bartender, and he was a regular at my bar. I first met him when I used to do the sort of thing you guys do. I was producing a documentary on Edgar Allan Poe. I worked at the National Endowment for the Arts, and I came to San Francisco to interview him about Poe. That's when we first met. And then fast forward years later, I was putting together the first issue of Radio Silence, and I had sent him an email, asked if he'd give me a short story, which is a big request for a fiction writer.
No kidding.
They can write you an essay, they can knock it off in an afternoon, but a short story, you don't get many of those.
Yeah.
You know? But he was, and at that time we were putting together Radio Silence, it was basically, you have to say to the contributors, trust me, we're going to create something and it's going to be cool.
Yeah.
I know I have nothing I can show you. We haven't done it yet. But if you got to give us something for it, and we will make something. And they just have to believe you.
Yeah.
And he did, and he gave us a hell of a story for that first issue. So when I was living in Portland when we were laying the groundwork for Radio Silence, knowing that I was going to come down here to the Bay Area to launch it here, I felt like this was the right town for it. So when I got down here, we've done a lot of events with him, and he and I now do Radio Silence, and Daniel, we co-host this thing each month called the Silent Reading Party. We do it at a hotel it's a bar connected to a hotel in San Francisco, where we gather on the first Tuesday of every month. Anyone who wants to come, everyone brings a book and orders drinks, and you just sit silently and read. Daniel DJs, so it's awesome. And there's no official thing, no one's paid. We all, there's about 6 of us that volunteer to put it together, and we raise money for a public school library each month. So we'll pick a different San Francisco public school that just has a shit budget for their library that really needs money for books, and that'll be the beneficiary, for that month, a different school for the next month. And
do any of the public schools in San Francisco not have a shit budget for their library?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but my guess is no. Right. I was a teacher for a while. I taught here in the East Bay. And I was at an independent school, which here it's some cross between public, private, and charter. And we did have a good budget. But I think
what city was that in?
It was in Berkeley.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have appreciators of education in Berkeley.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
yeah. Our students were from all over the East Bay, about half Berkeley, half Oakland, some from El Cerrito, Albany, a couple from Richmond.
Yeah.
But we had a great budget there. But that's lucky. My mom and my older sister both have been longtime public school teachers. I only went to public schools, and those budgets have just kept shrinking. So that's one of the things we're trying to do. Daniel and I both love reading. We both love booze. So we figured, let's put together an event that combines those things. They started this in Seattle, so we basically modeled it after The Stranger up there. Their Alt Weekly put this thing together like 10 years ago. And I've been to it, and it's great. I mean, you get like 200 people sitting on every scrap of carpet. with a book.
And everybody's just reading what they want to read.
Everyone's reading. There's no one stands up and gives a public reading. I mean, Daniel's there pretty much every time if he's in town, which is most of the time, and he's sort of a celebrity in this town, but no one's going up for autographs. Everyone just shows up to read, and because they love reading, and orders. Manhattans are on special, and $1 from every Manhattan glass of wine or beer goes to the school.
We're in.
We pass around a jar.
I'm going to speak for Pete. We're in.
Yeah, we'll see you there February 7th.
Yeah.
We just did it this past Tuesday. We got another one coming up.
Well, I saw that you had done it this past Tuesday. It was the 3rd, but I didn't see that till the morning of the 4th.
Oh, we screwed that up. With the holidays, everyone was traveling. Somebody that comes to it wrote us, and they were like, "Are you guys doing this thing tomorrow?" And we're like, "Oh shit, we forgot to send anything." So we didn't tell anyone until basically the day of. That's why I didn't hear about it till after. But anyway, with the thing we did at Google, they invited us to come down and just do a talk. And since Daniel and I had sort of cemented our friendship over a bar, he had the idea that we'd ask Google to kind of put together a bar for the event, and we would do our conversation as if I was his bartender and he was sitting at the bar. And it was a fun gig. We chose 3 works of art, a poem, a film, and a novel.
Yeah.
And I created a cocktail to go with each one, and then we batched a shitload of those cocktails and sent them out into the audience. When we would talk about each of those 3 pieces of art,
had an accompanying cocktail.
Yeah, exactly. And with the goal of, I think Daniel said at one point he was hoping that by the end of it, Google would kind of gear up and board their buses and go try to start some shit over at Yahoo or something.
Yeah.
I don't know if it got that out of hand, but
it didn't get quite that riled up.
I don't think so, but it was a pretty fun, Tuesday afternoon on the
cocktails that you were serving too were no joke. I mean,
they were real.
Yeah. You had an old fashioned, which the education on the old I'm a fan of the cocktail.
Yeah.
And I like to fancy myself an aficionado.
Right.
But to get an education on the old fashioned is worth every minute of that. Everybody go to YouTube and look it up right now.
It's funny. I can't even remember really what we talked about. I don't think I've watched it since we did it, but did we give an education on the old-fashioned?
I think what happened was you talked about there's an old-fashioned.
Right.
And then there's the old-fashioned.
Right, the old-fashioned, yeah.
The old-fashioned was, everybody's familiar with the new old-fashioned, which is essentially a fruit salad muddled with bourbon poured over it. And you said, no, we're going back a little further than that, which I appreciated. Mm-hmm. You served a gimlet.
Yep.
Which, that's great. Just delicious. By coincidence, my brother-in-law at Thanksgiving, he says, hey, make me a drink. And I said, oh, what do you want? And he goes, I don't know what I want. And I said, I know what you want. And I looked in my liquor cabinet. The first thing that was sitting there was a bottle of gin. So I said, you want a gimlet? I'm going to make you a gimlet. And I didn't make the simple syrup either. I just threw some sugar in there. But
that'll work.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about serious cocktails.
Yeah.
Everybody there had a honest to goodness right to be drunk.
Oh, for sure.
By the time you were done.
The most fun thing setting up for that, because I had never batched cocktails for, I don't know, like 100 people or whatever. We had to have them all ready in coolers, and so I made them at home.
Yeah.
But the old fashioned we did for that, it was, I think if I remember right, it was pairing with this poem that was about the early morning. Mm-hmm. So we made a old-fashioned infused with bacon. So I went into
maple syrup.
Yeah, bacon and maple syrup, right. So when I was getting ready, when I was kind of gathering all the ingredients for that gig, I went into this really precious grocery store that local people know called Berkeley Bowl, where everyone's everyone in there is very precious, and I went up to the butcher counter.
It's glorious. Everybody go to the Berkeley Bowl.
Oh my God, I know. I went up and asked for, I don't remember, several pounds of just bacon fat, and they basically hauled a pig carcass out. Everyone was horrified, and they just started sawing fat off the side of this carcass, and I was like, that's exactly because we rendered the fat and added it to several bottles of bourbon for like a night or two.
Fat. Right.
And then you skim the fat off, but by then you've infused it with the flavor. But it was a fun gig. So we've done, Daniel and I have done a few more like that. And then he's done some, he's a regular interviewer over at City Arts and Lectures where I've done a couple events as well. And somebody told me that recently he's taken that same model and basically made cocktails on stage during one of those events, which is it just makes conversations more fun.
Yeah.
You know?
It certainly did work for that because you had everybody's attention for two reasons. You know, they're sort of watching you for the cocktail. They're picking something up. You had something to say about the cocktail that made that a whole different, interesting part.
Yeah.
But then the piece of literature, the poem, the film.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, that film was glorious.
Yeah.
Have you seen this thing, Pete?
I started watching it last night. I didn't get through all of them.
The film was some Mexican film that had a Cuban actress in it that was...
Yeah, it was a musical, like an over-the-top, very campy musical.
Yeah.
Let's not reveal the name to the audience. We'll let it be a surprise. Also, I can't remember it, but amazing.
Good reason.
Yeah, exactly.
It was amazing.
Worth watching for sure.
Great.
It's Daniel's favorite film.
And that says a lot about Daniel. So I appreciate that you pulled that out of him.
Yeah.
That was worth quite a bit, actually.
Yeah.
When you do these things, the thing that I appreciate about that kind of endeavor is that we have booze and reading or the appreciation of a poem. Mm-hmm. And what you're doing when you combine that with the cocktail is, to me, you're making literature masculine, which I think the nerdiness of literature it's a bad rap.
Yeah.
Because literature is fucking masculine.
Right.
And
it
I
can
think
be.
As much as we can help people appreciate it properly, we ought to.
I agree. And your first question about what we're trying to do with Radio Silence, part of it is I've always loved music, but my background's much more on the literature side than on the music side because I write and edit. But we had this idea that we didn't advertise, which was that if we could get people to pick up a copy of Radio Silence because we've got Ian MacKaye, Carrie Brownstein, Lucinda Williams, Bruce Springsteen, contributors like that they know on the music side, so they'll pick it up because of that. They're also going to encounter, the short stories of Don Carpenter or a short story a poem by Paul Muldoon or a short story by Edith Wharton or Willa Cather or something that or they may go to it because they recognize Ray Bradbury, but then they'll find a bunch of stuff they don't know. So in a way it's a way to sort of trick people into discovering or having an experience with literature, even if they go to it because of music. And the booze thing's kind of similar. They might, people at the Google event, maybe they went to the gig because Google was giving them permission to go drink cocktails at 3 o'clock on a work day.
Good enough reason.
Good enough. But there they were. We're talking about a Raymond Chandler novel and talking about an obscure poem, and So I think part of it is, you find these interesting combinations of literature and something else, and it's a way to expand an audience, bring people into an experience that they might not otherwise have found.
I like that you guys are taking time, too, to slow down in the 8-second news cycle world, where everything's got to be, we have short attention spans. Like, yeah, but you can also slow down. And I promise right now, like if Ernest Hemingway was sitting here, we'd all be drinking. Yeah. You can't be a bigger literary giant than him, and we'd be having a great time, and he'd be telling stories.
Yeah.
So it's okay to not lose sight of that. It's okay to slow down and appreciate some of these things because you do have the fellowship of being together and sharing an experience. Obviously, awesome literature and about a topic that everybody likes something. I mean, who's answered what's your favorite kind of music? Isn't I like pretty much everything. Like that's the normal answer you get. So you've got all these things that
from
come
people
together.
who don't realize what everything is.
Yeah,
but it starts the conversation, and that's kind of the point,
right?
The starting of the conversation and the making the conversation meaningful. And I appreciate that you bring that point up, Pete, because man, there's not enough of it.
Yeah. And I think an anthology or any kind of book like that. Some of my favorite books growing up were like those best sports stories of this year, sports stories.
Oh, yeah,
and you're forced to read about some girl that gets spinal meningitis who played basketball, and you start crying because, this horrible thing happens. And then you're on to the next thing. And it's these stories that you would have never grabbed.
Yeah, this process of discovery. Yeah. And what you said, Pete, about creating this space outside of all the noise of media and culture. That's actually what the name Radio Silence is about. That's
Sure,
why we
okay.
named it that.
Okay.
Was
That
that we
makes
were
sense.
trying, our vision for it was to try to create something that was outside that space. So we don't write about news and politics in it because we want to, I think there's got to be something in our culture that is outside of that. That
That's-
stuff's important too, and we're going to get as much of that as we can bear.
That's a
But
common
we
thread.
got other stuff as well.
The common thread between what we try to do here too, like we could ask you the questions like, tell us about when you were a teacher, and get the bio questions, and those things are great,
Right.
but those can be found in other places.
Yeah.
We're trying to create a deeper experience, and so with that experience, I'd love to learn a little bit more about the genesis moment of when all of the Radio Silence, the 4 pieces, how did that come together? Are you in a
Yeah.
bar? How did that happen?
Well, that happened.
In a bar.
Yeah, it probably did. I worked for the National Endowment for the Arts in D.C. I first was here as a teacher, and then I went to D.C. for that job, and I mainly was producing radio documentaries about books. And we did some other, like some shows about jazz and Shakespeare and poetry, some other national initiatives. But the main one I worked on was called The Big Read. We created about 25 documentaries about great novels. I had the best job on that gig. I travel around the country to interview those writers, artists, actors, and musicians about these books. And then I had studios back in D.C. But I knew that it was a job I only wanted to do for a certain amount of time. First of all, with these federal agencies, every time the administration changes,
Sure.
everything that the group that was in there created, it all gets dismantled by whoever comes in next, so they can create their own shit. Even if it's good, they don't
Right.
care.
Yeah.
They want to, have ownership over what they're doing and ownership over the agency. So it had a finite lifespan anyway. And also, I knew there's no way I wanted to make a career in Washington. So it was something to go do for a while, and I was there for 6 years. So when that was coming to an end, I went to grad school to study writing for a year. Just did an MFA, did a year-long program to study fiction. And I wanted to take my experiences creating those documentaries and all the interesting people I've met, like Daniel and other people, and do something. So I started brainstorming and asking advice. A couple good friends, musicians, I talked to them, and they ended up on the board of directors for Radio Silence, like Nico Case and Zach Rogue, who's in the band Rogue Wave. And talking with them and some other friends, the idea started to take shape. I'm sure some of it happened in a bar, but it kind of happened all over. And it was like, well, all right, what can we do? What can we create? I love books. I love physical books, which is why we put so much attention and time and expense into creating Radio Silence, trying to make it a beautiful thing. So I knew I wanted that to be part of it, but I'd done all this work in audio, and I loved that too. So I knew I wanted eventually that to be part of it. And if you just are creating a print magazine, you kind of have to have a digital component. So we knew eventually we would launch that part of it and figure out what form that would take. Mm-hmm. And then live events, the 4th component. It's the oldest form of publishing. Gather people in a room, have somebody perform or
give them
talk or
something.
read.
Yeah.
Just get people to have a shared experience in a room, which you'd think our culture does less and less of. Well, everything goes digital, but that's not really true. That people still value that. So we knew we wanted
if
that
anything,
to be
they
part
crave
of
it.
Yeah, they do. I think they really do. So those things, they felt like they worked together naturally, and we knew also that we'd need to roll them out one at a time because we needed to figure out how to do them. I had never put together something like the print magazine. We needed to figure it out. So with our art director, who lives here in town, we would just sit down and draw stuff and look at models. And we took months and months. I was in the city at the time, and he was here in Oakland, and we would sit at his big kitchen table and just slowly over months figure it out as we were putting together the contributors. We did a Kickstarter to raise money to print the first issue. And I think at that point there were really only 3 of us working on the magazine, and then slowly we built up.
That's a lot of work.
The stuff. Yeah, but we loved doing it. And it was a side project to see what can we do with it. Right. And then it took off for a while, and I'm totally at peace with where it's at right now. If it revives in some form later, that's cool. And if it doesn't, that's fine too. We had it, with things like this, I think sometimes they have a good run and then they find an end, and that can be a good thing.
It can be.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad to think to have to survive it in real time and understand that it's the end. But
Yeah.
if what you've created has a finite beginning and end and is exactly what it is right now, it's hard to argue that it's not a masterpiece.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And it's, I mean, what you put together here is very interesting in that when you look at
John and Pete.
Hey, everybody, if you like the Break It Down show,
I can dig it.
And of course you do.
of course you do, hit that subscribe button.
John and Pete.
It helps us out.
Hey, if you're going to like the show on Facebook or on Twitter, it helps us out if you share the show so people can learn about it. So liking it is great. Sharing is even better.
Let's do some spy stuff.
Yeah, just
Let's
sneak
get
in
all
there.
our friends' phones and have them subscribe to the Break It Down show. Do it. Subscribe. Listen to the show. If you love the show, tell 5 of your friends. Or if you hate the show, tell 5 of your friends. Before I get into that, I'm completely distracted by this fucking perpetual snowflake
Yeah, I don't know.
thing.
I
that
guess
is a-
it's frozen.
I don't know what
condensed
this
milk,
is.
maybe.
Yeah, it might be.
Yeah.
Frozen condensed milk.
I don't
It
know.
looks like a toasted marshmallow.
Yeah.
But it's frozen, and it's been frozen in this drink since before we.
And we're sitting
Hit
at Blackwater
record.
Station. We should say that here in Oakland,
Oh, yeah, we
California.
are.
So
Yeah.
Blackwater Station, thank you. The
Yeah.
drinks are lovely.
Here in Temescal in Oakland, this place isn't very old, maybe a year old or so. But you just want to add some coffee and maybe some whiskey to that cube and see what happens.
Yes, you do.
And maybe we should.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, well, knowing a great idea when we hear it, we should do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
We want to update our drinks. We want to enjoy this lovely.
What is that?
It's a New Orleans style cold brew coffee.
Well, no, what's that?
What's that?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a frozen milk ice cube, so it doesn't dilute as you go down.
Love it.
Yeah. Well, we want to use the frozen milk
For
to
sure.
its perfect advantage.
Of course, 3 more of those.
Well,
Yeah, and maybe a shot of whiskey in each one.
Yeah, we have to do that.
There we go.
I'll be right out.
Thanks.
Now it's a party. Damn.
We just invented a drink.
Yeah.
There it is. That's how it happens.
Yeah.
When the old fashioned was invented, that was it.
so what's this drink called?
God, I don't know.
I'm going to, just for our server / bartender, what's your name?
Kathan.
Kathan.
Yeah.
This is the Break It Down show that we're doing right now. And so we're plugging the place, and we're plugging you.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, Blackwater Station, come on by.
Blackwater Station. Kathan says,
Name
"Come
the
on
drink.
by."
When
What's
you come back with a drink, give it a name.
For sure. I'll be
All
right
right.
out.
okay?
That's my kind of guy for sure. Yes,
So
I can
far-
do that. Those are the best answers ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So far, it's a New Orleans coffee, but when you put bourbon into it,
It becomes
there's
something else.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
it deserves a name.
Yeah.
So, I have a friend. His name is Scott Johnson,
Uh huh.
and he and I have probably more developed than they need to be debates about a lot of things music. And I said, "Hey, by the way, I'm interviewing Dan Stone for the podcast this afternoon. What do you want to ask Dan Stone?" And he says, the ebb and flow of genres he's concerned with. He says, I think about this more from a perspective of creative relevance rather than popularity. Why are musical innovators in 2016 drawn to genres like hip-hop or EDM rather than rock? And what's going to bring people back to rock, if you can define it as, you know, more the Springsteen genre and less hip-hop or EDM? I think Scott may have a point in that there are a lot of innovators in the other genres right now.
Yeah.
But I think to bring audiences back to what will become classic rock once
Right.
it ages properly, what do we need to do? What do we need
You
to
know,
do to get the talent
I really
stimulated?
don't know. I don't know if there's anything that you can do. I think it all just keeps spidering out, and I think that's just naturally the way it goes. So there was that era where we had great rock. There's several eras where we did, and then there's the era before that where it was a little different, and the era before that where it was a little different.
Yeah.
And what we're creating now has got to be different. I think that's the thing about rock. You don't really want to go backwards.
That's the
So-
natural order of things.
Yeah, and who knows where it's going to go, but these genres keep blending in ways, and they're going to always do that. And I think it's like what we were talking about a minute ago, where people start to crave these more genuine, intimate experiences. Music's going to always keep doing that too. I think
Yeah.
it's going to keep simplifying, complicated, and then reverts back and gets simple
Pare
again.
back down, borrow something really good from
in
something.
some corner. It will always be doing that.
we're in an era, I think, when it comes with rock and roll, like getting back, like I agree with you, we've progressed past that. We went from fugues to operas, and I'm really cutting out a lot of time, to ragtime, to big band, and you don't go back to big band type music, but it still exists. You can still consume it. So we are going forward with that. And the maestros of our day now are people like Bruce Springsteen and Sammy Hagar and these guys that already have done not everything you can do in rock, but they've taken
I
that
smell
art
the bourbon.
form.
Sorry, Pete. Didn't mean to cut you off. What's the thing called?
I figured it might as well be called the Bourbon Street Coffee since it's more
Perfect.
The Bourbon Street Coffee.
You nailed it.
Very clever.
Bourbon Street Coffee.
Absolutely.
Well done. Well done.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah, cheers. So the maestros of our time, people like Sammy Hagar, people like Bruce Springsteen, they are already at the very tip, and they've figured
That was
out
exactly
a lot.
what that needed to be.
Oh,
Yes, they figured out a lot of what needs to happen in that genre of music. So the new artists, maybe they go back and do something, but they're going to focus where the new work needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I want to go back to my conversation with Scott because
Yeah.
it was brief but very meaningful, as
that's
many
good.
of our conversations are. And the next thing that he said, it seems like genres that return from these kinds of creative dips do so by co-opting sounds or techniques from other genres. Mm-hmm. Like hip-hop pulling from modern electronic genres over the past decade, or when jazz got funky in the early 70s, which is a great pull because now that's like the Herbie Hancock, Brecker Brothers generation, and that was terrific.
Yeah, or Bitches Brew.
Right,
Yeah.
but it had to reach and borrow.
In that sense, that's been going on for a long time because who hasn't sampled Led Zeppelin or the Beatles or straight out stolen from those guys to do new music?
Right, right. That was always an interesting question we asked in our group of people who were putting radio sounds together. Is we were often asked, and then we would ask ourselves how we were defining rock and roll, because
That
we
is a
call
great
it
question.
a magazine of literature and rock and roll.
Right.
But there isn't really a way to define rock and roll anymore without being exclusive, without excluding a lot of things that could be considered rock and roll. So what we would have called it, what we're trying to do with the magazine, was popular music, if pop music didn't now mean basically shitty radio music.
Yep.
But the original definition of popular music, which was music that reached a lot of people, and in which case hip-hop and country would probably be the closest to that definition right now.
We have sort of a show definition of rock and roll.
Yeah.
Because we
Let's hear it.
recognize when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame starts inducting people, they're trying to define it too. So if the person,
And we don't always agree with it.
yeah, right. But that's part of the thing. That's rock and roll.
Yeah.
So Joan Baez just got in. You can't be more rock and roll than her. She
Yeah.
gives a middle finger to everything, everybody, how you play the instrument. She does what the fuck
But
she
the other
wants to
side
do.
of
Yeah.
that argument is somebody's going to be like, well, Black Sabbath, that's rock and roll.
Yeah.
Joan Baez. But the reality is, what we're talking about is the music that speaks to a generation that wants their parents to be fearful of something.
Yeah.
Right.
Our test is if Chris Brown shows up at your house to date your daughter, what do you think? You
Yeah.
know, Chris Brown's
Not
rock
good.
and roll as fuck.
Right.
you know?
And if you
Yeah.
say, oh, hell no,
Yeah.
that's rock and roll.
When NWA shows up and the FBI is like, fuck that,
Yeah.
that's rock and roll.
Because
Right,
NWA was essentially our generation's Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
Right.
They pissed everybody off.
And you might
Absolutely.
think that Daryl Hall isn't rock and roll because he doesn't fit that standard, but he absolutely does. Because what's Daryl Hall trying to do to your daughter once he gets her out of that house? He's going to sing those songs by the garbage can, and your daughter's going to, So yeah, Daryl Hall can terrify you.
Yeah.
That's as rock and roll as it gets, right? there.
Absolutely. I like that. It's got to be a broad definition. That one's as good as any.
I like that the backdrop of your definition of rock and roll was "I Want to Be Sedated" by the Ramones. I don't know if anybody can hear that, but that was the background music. And
Yeah, there we
perfect
go.
at the
Yeah.
time, and it is perfect. And some people will say, "No, that's punk." Yeah, okay, great, but now you're excluding.
Yeah.
Right.
And as soon as you start drawing lines,
What's more anti-establishment than punk, anyhow?
right.
Yeah.
So there you are. This drink is spectacular.
Yeah.
It really is. This is great.
So-
I used to make a drink like this at a bar I worked at in Portland, but we would make it in the summer, and we use coconut milk and make it a frozen drink, like a coffee syrup, coconut milk, bourbon. It's delicious.
What's your go-to drink? What's the Dan Stone?
It's right now it's just an old fashioned. When I was in that world, I worked in a lot of different sorts of bars, from the seediest dive bar to nicer restaurants where they had craft cocktails, that whole trend. And I was deep in that world, as was my wife, for a while. and I just got tired of it. I don't want to drink somebody's special creation anymore. The classics are classics for a reason.
Yeah.
If it's the winter, I'm a whiskey. I like whiskey and gin primarily, and some sort of bitter Italian liquors. But if it's winter, I want an old fashioned, maybe a Manhattan. Drank way too many Manhattans over the holidays.
Do you care if they use a maraschino cherry instead of the proper cherries, that kind of thing?
For a Manhattan?
Yeah.
I don't really. I don't even put a cherry in mine. I'll usually put an orange or a lemon twist in a Manhattan. Mm-hmm. But I'll basically just drink an old-fashioned Manhattan or just drink whiskey. On the gin side, I like a good martini,
Yeah, there are certain landmarks in my drinking past, and I don't say these things lightly. I know many of our listeners out there that we have to be respectful of are in recovery, and we salute you and keep up the good work. But thankfully, the same thing that probably makes me mired in my lack of success is that I don't have an addictive personality that way. So I've been able to enjoy being a drinker my entire drinking career.
Yeah.
We like to say we've tried to be alcoholics, we failed at it.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen.
And there are certain markers. Like I remember one time I took my wife out. I think it was like our second date.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to this place called the Pepper Mill, which was over in Concord. Oh. And it was sort of a recreation of not a Vegas, but a Reno.
There's the big casino in Reno.
The Reno
Mill,
yeah.
And
it is, right?
Yeah,
the one in Vegas is just as Reno as hell, too.
Right, and that's the thing. Is the one in Vegas is Reno as hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what it is
perpetuates 76 prom night.
The waitress in the cocktail area is beautiful. No, was beautiful several years ago. But she's still hanging in there.
Yeah.
And she's wearing that cocktail dress that looks great. Kinda. She's still hanging in there. God bless her. And
there's a whole lot of velvet.
She's going to bring you a drink. And what I chose I was 21 years old at the time. And I thought, you know what I'd like? I'd like a martini, but I'm going to go for even more masculine than a martini. I'm going to get myself a Bombay Sapphire martini. I want it served in a bucket glass on the rocks. That's what I want.
Yeah.
So I got that thing, and I drank it. While we were sitting they had this like sunken area that had a fire pit.
Yeah.
But it was dressy. So I was wearing a suit, and they were sitting in the sunken area like a playboy. And I drank this drink, and I was fucking hammered.
Yeah.
Before dinner. And so the hostess came over and said, okay, your table's ready. And I went, oh, great. And I stood up, and I took my lovely date by the hand, and I don't know what I did after that because I was fucked up. I hobbled my way to the table, and I made it through dinner, and somehow I got home.
Yeah.
But every time I drink a martini, I have that very, very fond memory of like, wow, I had no idea how that was going to turn out.
That's good. So my wife can't go near a maraschino cherry.
Oh, no?
Because
she had the experience.
I was there the night. She must have had 20 maraschino cherries at the bottom of drinks, and man, she can't go near them anymore.
Wow.
Do you? Maybe you don't know this, so we'll hit you at the best martini in Oakland. But do you know where the best martini in Oakland is?
I don't. I think with a martini, it's more a matter of how many places fuck it up. You know, because it's such a simple drink that, and everyone likes it a different way. But originally, I actually know where the best martini is. That I think the best martini is in the city, which is, I know bars in the city better because that's where I bartended in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. But I think it's Lolinda. I don't know if they still have it. They have a Navy strength martini. Because originally martini was equal parts gin and dry vermouth. Now everyone thinks it's fashionable to ask for a dry martini because of James Bond. I think it's probably where that trend started. Which just means you're getting rid of, and shaken. Which, when you order a dry martini, you're getting rid of one of the two ingredients.
Yeah. You want that martini wet as hell.
I like it wet. I mean, especially if you've got good vermouth. But
I like my martinis like I like my women.
Drunk?
Wet and dirty.
So the best martini in town is up on the hill at Bob Greenberg's house. It's by
yes.
only. So we're going to have to get you there.
Oh, shit. We have to introduce you to Bob Greenberg.
Oh, I'd love to meet him if he's got the best martini
Yeah,
in
no
town.
kidding. Bob Greenberg is a professor of music. He taught at Cal for a while, and he lives up in Piedmont. And there's a series of lectures called the Great Courses.
Oh yeah, I don't know about those.
He does the series on what we call classical music. He calls it literate music.
Uh-huh.
The other thing that he likes to do besides compose and talk about composition is he collects martini shakers from all around the world, a hobby that was sort of, like any great hobby, started for him.
Yeah.
You know, when somebody starts a collection for you because they give you that one gift that you go, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with this, but suddenly you get attached to it.
Right.
And then you go, you know what? I have that thing at home that's just like this thing that I found somewhere. And now you have two of something, and it's a collection. Well, he's got hundreds
Oh man,
of martini shakers.
If you do take me up there, I'll bring him one that I've had for years that weighs about 25 pounds, and it's a polar bear that's about 1.5 feet tall that somebody got me. We were somewhere overseas, and someone thought it was a good idea to give it to me as a gift then, so I had to carry it around for a while. But it is giant. It's a great polar bear. So if we go see Bob Greenberg, we'll add to his collection.
I'm sure that if we go back more than once, and he's been on our show 3 times, that's what happens. So the first time that we interviewed him, I don't know how Pete, if you haven't picked up on this, Pete is great at getting guests to say yes without knowing what they're saying yes to. So here we are.
Yeah.
But Bob Greenberg said yes and didn't know what he was saying yes to. And in arranging where we were going to do the podcast, we ended up doing it at Dwayne Wiggins' house. Mm-hmm. Dwayne Wiggins is one of the brothers in Tony.
Ah.
So here comes Bob Greenberg, and he's like, what is this place? This is Dwayne Wiggins' house, man. There might be a naked chick walking by at any time. You never know. So Greenberg shows up. We have a great time. He says, next time, just by coincidence, at the end, I said, next time we do this, we ought to do this over martinis.
Yeah.
Just got lucky. And lobbed that out there, and he went, oh, martinis. Okay. You want to do it over martinis, do you? Next time we're doing it at my house. And we go to his house, and we see display cases with jewelry store lighting.
Cases and cases
Yeah.
and cases.
Wow.
I mean, he's got a Steinway piano that essentially half of his house was constructed around.
Yeah.
And then cases of martini shakers with
Tens of thousands of dollars worth of martini cases or martini setups, and then these shakers individually aren't all that expensive. Some are, but most of them are just standard things. But he's been all over the world gathering them, so
like a
his
museum.
collection's incredible.
And they're a lot like your martini shaker, where somebody comes to him and says, I will bequeath this to your collection.
Yeah.
Here's the story.
Yeah.
And, so everything's got a story.
Oh, that's great.
We'll have to have you guys sit down and we'll have to do a show together.
Cool.
That'll be fun.
Sounds great.
Yeah, he's overdue
Yeah.
for one. So that would be...
The minute
that
we
would be
leave
great.
Bob's house, we're overdue for another show with Bob.
Yeah.
Also,
He is
here's what he does.
So wonderful.
He's from New Jersey originally.
Mm-hmm.
And when he graduated high school, he went straight to Yale. He got accepted to Yale to study music at Yale.
Mm-hmm.
And then his brother says, hey, I'm on the prom committee. And, man, we got this band coming to play our prom, and you ought to really check them out. And he's like, I go to Yale. I'm at the Yale music band. What the hell would I do with a... It was Springsteen.
Oh yeah.
So, he'll lob a story in
that's
like
funny.
that.
That is funny.
He's fan. You've interviewed Springsteen.
I did. Yeah. Yeah.
That is an incredible pull. I mean, the people you interview are incredible. I mean, there's
It's
no
been a great stretch lately. Yeah. This fall was busy. I did Patti Smith and Springsteen on back-to-back nights.
That is insane.
That's
for
a good week.
Sirius Lectures. It
That's
was
some
a
rock
good
and roll
week.
right there.
Yeah, yeah. And it's kind of fun because there's a lot of interesting connections between those two. They're both from really modest blue-collar backgrounds in New Jersey. Born, I think, 1 year apart. Very similar family and upbringing. But then one of them, Patty, went to New York and kind of got deep into the center of Bohemian culture at the time, whereas Bruce went in the opposite direction and became the king of bar bands and stayed home and became the king of bar bands on the Jersey Shore. But so it just shows that these two people from the same place, both super talented, had just very diverging paths. And then they intersected again later with mainly through the song "Because the Night." And they performed. Springsteen wrote it. Didn't really fit on. I think it was on. I don't remember which record, "Darkness on the Edge of Town" or "The River," but it didn't quite fit on the record. So he offered it to Patty. she liked it, but asked if she could rewrite the lyrics. He said okay, so she did, and then they've sort of passed the song back. They've each performed it. They performed it together a couple times. When I did my gig with her in October, she played it. She introduced it as like the warm up for Bruce, who was coming the next night.
The thing I like about Patti Smith and what she does is she absolutely can write her own songs at a world-class level, but she'll take your song that doesn't quite fit, and it may fit great when you're done with it and on the album, and she's going to be like, but let me show you how to make this my own.
Yeah.
And I love that kind of the ability to reinvent something. Not necessarily do a cover, but just to take a song and give it a greater or different depth.
Yeah. And that was her biggest hit. And, she just, you probably saw, she just accepted Dylan's Nobel for him in Sweden and played Hard Rain's Gonna Fall. Isn't that what she played?
I think that's right. I
read
read a lot of song titles the last couple of nights.
It was, God, it was a powerful. You should check it out. It was an incredibly powerful performance because she got into the second verse and forgot the lyrics, and she's performing in front of Swedish royalty and all the other Nobel laureates and with an orchestra behind her, and she just forgot the lyrics. And instead of it being this disaster, it then ended up everyone in the audience in tears by the end of the thing. I mean, everybody.
What is more rock and roll than that?
Because she asked them to start that verse back over, and she found her way.
Yeah.
And it was just triumphant by the end and so moving.
Yeah.
Really moving. She is incredible.
She's the person who can take that Mariah Carey level disaster and turn it into something triumphant.
Yeah. It's triumphant and memorable and very powerful. I was worried about the gig with her because there's rumors that she's pretty grumpy and that she's just such a loner that you never know if you're going to get. But what I found meeting her and doing the stage thing with her, which was part of City Arts and Lectures in October, an incredibly sweet and engaging woman. It was just amazing. One of the best interviews I've ever done was that session with her.
Wow.
And she is so unbelievably talented in so many areas of art. I mean, music was just a way for her originally to make poetry readings less boring. She was a writer, and somebody convinced her to do a poetry reading at the St. Mark's Poetry Project in New York at the time. Warhol was in the audience, and she didn't want to do a boring reading, so she asked her guitar player friend, a guy she'd hung out with a few times, Lenny Kay, didn't know him well. She asked if he'd come play electric guitar behind a couple of the poems. And it sort of horrified the poetry community, who was the electric guitar had never been played.
But she's fucking rock and roll. That's why.
Yeah. So she became the godmother.
She's like, these are your rules?
Godmother of punk.
I give a fuck about these rules.
Exactly.
Is that true though for the great artists, that they find their medium, but it happens to be that medium? I mean, most great artists, and even Springsteen, as wonderful a guitar player as he is, he's not as wonderful a guitar player as Tommy Tedesco. Mm-hmm. But he's the boss.
Yeah.
And it's because he has something to say.
Right.
Virtuosity on an instrument is splendid. We love that. We celebrate that. But ultimately, the people we really, really embrace who become iconic are the people who have something to say and then just stumbled upon that as their medium. Mm-hmm. That was the right thing to thrust their perspective of life onto humanity.
Yeah. Yeah, with Springsteen, it's an interesting case because he was primarily a guitarist when he was a bar band king, and he never wanted to sing. They were always looking for a lead singer for his bands.
Of course. He doesn't have a voice that you'd want to pick. You wouldn't pick that voice.
And you'd say the same thing about Dylan, of course,
Sure.
and Tom Waits, but those are such distinctive, legendary voices because of their uniqueness. And other things and their expressiveness. But with Springsteen, if you've read his book yet, but everybody should. It's a hell of a good book. But he mainly had that realization over a period of time. But part of it happened here in the Bay Area when he came out with his band. His parents were living here at the time, and they got a gig playing a bunch of shows in San Francisco. And he realized then that although he was a really good guitar player, he wasn't a great guitar player compared to some of the talent he was seeing. So when they went back to Jersey and he started to figure out what his next move was, he realized that it had to be songwriting, and he had to create a unique enough voice for himself and a unique enough approach or he was just going to be playing bars for the rest of his life. So he started thinking, I'm a guitarist.
I'm going to play this
is what
prom.
I'm going to do. Yeah, and I'm going to, hopefully I'll reach the higher levels. Yeah,
Right.
the best proms out there.
Yeah.
And then he realized, if I'm going to really go somewhere with this, I've got to do something different, and it's got to be songwriting based. So he cleared it, went on his own, figured out how to do that, and then ended up in John Hammond's office, recording a demo.
But figuring it out on his own is no small step, because there's a lot of people who are like, I need to be a songwriter, and they don't. They need to be a sales manager for whatever company.
Yeah.
You know? And you have to find your voice, and that probably is your voice at that point. But he was able to crack the code on not just writing things that move people, but taking things that are already written and just turning that phrase, and you're like, God, that phrase means something totally different now that you've said it in this way.
Yeah.
And that poetry gift is something that you combine that with good presence up front, this voice that moves people that no one would pick, but
Right.
absolutely is great for what he does. And
Yeah.
you've got this incredible talent. I was going to ask you, it seems like, from my perspective, and that's why I'm asking the questions I'd like to know, that you tend to gravitate towards social conscious kind of rockers when you get interviews. Is that just by happenstance? I mean, Robbie Roberts and Patti Smith, these are people, Elvis Costello, these are
Right.
people that have a heavy social conscience to their muse.
Yeah.
They can't write just a party song or a love song. There's got to be other things in their body of work.
Are you asking if that's the sort of music I'm a fan of?
Is that something that you're drawn to? Does that just how does
well,
that?
I'll tell you, in the case of the interviews, those were, I said no to a handful of things that I've been invited for, but with those I'm big fans of,
Sure.
of those four in particular that you mentioned, but not necessarily because they have a social consciousness to what to their art. That's not the reason, but I think my tastes are pretty broad. I do appreciate that about those four. I would say Patti Smith and Springsteen more so, or that would be true about them more so probably than Robbie Robertson and the band and Elvis, although it's true of all four of them, really.
Sure, right.
But Patti and Bruce have been more politically active. Like what I mentioned with radio silence, I usually like to, and sometimes you can't, I usually like to keep my appreciation of art and my feelings and thoughts about politics separate. So things that are overtly political in art don't really do it for me.
I would agree with that, but it doesn't mean that you're not maybe more susceptible to being touched by something that is a statement about humanity or injustice.
Absolutely.
Or,
I mean,
those
we just
things.
mentioned Hard Rain's Gonna Fall. There couldn't be a more political song. That is an absolute masterpiece. It's a tearjerker.
Yeah.
Incredible song. But it's a great piece of art.
Right.
There's other art that has political motives, and that's the center of what that work of art's trying to do, and that's the stuff that doesn't do it for me as much. It does
Yeah.
for some people, and that's fine, and it's got its place. But for me, with my for my taste, the art's got to be there first, and then it can be doing several other things, and that's great.
Yeah. It's almost like you don't like Jaguars because they're green.
Yeah.
They happen to be green. That's the national color. But
Right.
it's an also ran. But it speaks to other things that point to a more thoughtful, more literary, if I may, form of songwriting where somebody does actually have something to say that's of some consequence. Mm-hmm. So,
Yeah.
We've heard you talk a little bit about music you don't like without specifically really getting into that. What's your favorite song? Like right now, if you were to pull the lever
Favorite
and
song?
Yeah, what would you say?
Oh
What
my
moves you
God.
right now?
I'll tell you, there's a musician in Portland. He's the frontman of a band. I love this guy. I just saw him perform in San Francisco night before last. His name is Kyle Morton, and he's the frontman of a band called Typhoon. Yeah, I got him to write something for our first issue when I was still living up in Portland. I knew
Also
him
got
through
to have Scott
friends.
Fitzgerald to write something for you. That's impressive.
He was
That's not
easy
only-
to convince.
That's a deep pull.
He's just looking for gigs at this point,
Right.
so he was easy. Anyway, Kyle just put out his first solo record, and it's really damn good. It's a great album for winter. It's pretty dark, and he put on a solo show the other night that was mind-blowing. So that's something I'm excited about right now.
where was that show?
That was at Swedish American Hall.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've never been to Swedish American.
You know,
Hall.
they've sort of rejuvenated that place. Noise Pop came in and has taken over the booking of it. And, Noise Pop in this restaurant group in the city called the Natimius Restaurant Group that owns places like Flower and Water and Salou Maria, they bought the old jazz. It was an old jazz joint, and a basement jazz joint on Market. I'm blanking on the name right now. You know what I'm talking about? That basement place has become less of a music spot, which is a bummer. But at the same time, they renovated the hell out of the Swedish American Hall and made it into a great music venue. So they do shows up there all the time, and Noise Pop curates and produces those shows.
Wow.
It's become a really good spot.
What's the name of the place we saw Natalie Dawn?
The old church.
The old church. That was a pretty cool venue, too.
Oh, yeah,
It's
she's
still
good.
small. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We had her on the show.
Cool.
She's fantastic.
Yeah.
We lost a lot of big musicians in 2016. People
my
that we
God.
would love to have on the show. I mean, obviously, we'd love to have Prince, Glenn Frey, David Bowie. I mean, we actually had Nick Gillette on the show. But who's gone? Not necessarily 2016, but who's gone that you would love to sit in front of you and do an interview with?
Do an interview with?
Yeah.
Yeah, the old sit on a bus bench for an hour.
Yeah.
Who would you
You
bring?
can pick
who would you
anybody.
bring back?
I would say of the people we lost in 2016, first choice would probably be Leonard Cohen.
Yeah.
I would also say Prince, although I think it would be, if we're talking about doing an interview, I think it would be a really hard interview.
Yeah, that would
just
be
like I would
painful.
love to do one with
Who's
Dylan.
harder,
I think it would be a really
him or
damn
Johnny
hard.
Rotten? Who's harder to interview?
Today, probably Prince. I would bet Johnny Rotten. We tried to get him to do some stuff for Radio Silence. We couldn't quite get through to him. I know he's down in L.A., right?
I think that's right.
He's probably softened up a little.
Yeah, I think he probably has.
I think
Back when
Prince
he was
softened
still
up a
going
little
under.
too, though.
Yeah. But I think with a guy like him who's such a legend, and
Yeah.
it's got to be such a hard life. You know, I think that.
And he has to toe that line.
Yeah,
You know,
and-
when they
and
got
he's a- and
inducted,
it's a
he
He
percentage.
sent
did
that letter.
absolutely know that he was Prince.
Well, and he's living a persona the way that Dylan is as well. Like,
Sure.
You know, you end up adopting a name to perform under, and then you end up becoming that persona after a while. And I think it's got to be hard to escape from that. So I think doing an interview, I mean, the thing that people love about Bruce is he seems so genuine all the time. It's that you know who he is. He's a guy who plays in bars. His name is Bruce. You know, but like Elvis Costello, that's not his real name. Bob Dylan, that's not his real name. Prince. So you have these other guys from that same era who.
Prince's name was Prince, but it wasn't not
But
like
that's
that.
a persona.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So I would say that would be a fun interview, but probably a tough one. But with Leonard Cohen, I would love to
I
talk
think you
to
get
him.
you what you see is what you get. I mean, he's going to put it on the
I
table.
think
for
so.
you.
I think so. And I would say everyone at that level is probably pretty guarded.
Yeah.
You know, and that.
I think that's a great reason for that pick, though, because you're going to get something life changing from that.
I
as
think the
opposed
work
to-
he put out at the end of his life too was amazing.
Yeah.
I love those last couple of records.
Well, that's really when, you know, you've mastered your craft,
Mm-hmm.
and you get to say whatever he gets to say whatever the hell he wants to say, which also is rock and roll.
Yeah.
And he doesn't give a fuck if you care about it.
Yeah.
This is, you know, that's his life's work right there.
Yeah.
And then part B of my question, literary people, who would you love to sit across from any time frame?
Oh, wait, first
There's
about
a lot
the
more time frame there.
About musicians,
Yeah.
I would have also put Merle Haggard in there.
Oh,
that,
yeah,
my
bro.
God, that would have been fun.
Bean Man.
That was a huge
Yeah.
loss. Literary people, living people.
Past. Let's just do people that have, because you can still get the living.
Well,
people.
Cormac McCarthy, it seems like he's from a different era,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't get to him. He won't give interviews, but I've always wanted to do something with him. In the past, I mean, obviously Hemingway would be a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Another one of those things where you're not quite sure what you'd get. I bet it would be an interview about everything except literature.
And that'd have to be all right.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the thing, is that you'd almost want that
Yeah,
from
you
Hemingway.
definitely would.
How about Kerouac?
Yeah. You know, I like Kerouac, and I appreciate him and the beats less so than I did at another point.
that age?
Yeah, at another point in my life.
Yeah.
But if somebody said, "Hey, I got Kerouac down at the bar. You want to come hang out?"
Yeah.
Of
Hell yes.
course, I'm
the
there.
answer to that question
Yeah.
is yes.
Yeah.
Also, Jack London.
Oh,
Because
my
he
God,
would
yeah.
regale you with
Huge.
stories of horrors for an hour.
Yeah.
Love to sit down with Jack London.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it'd be cool if we were to have him sit here with us right now with Homer and have him be like, look at all the stuff you built pretty much everybody just copied you for the last 2,000 years, you know?
Yeah.
Be like, what do you think about that? Just let that guy talk.
Yeah.
Just shut the hell up, you know?
Yeah, but you say that now because we have hindsight. He'd probably look at stuff and go, I don't even recognize
That's what I want to
that."
hear him say. Well,
Yeah.
be like, no, but we all have ties. You can't see it maybe, but
Yeah.
just say, hi, Homer. How are you? And then just shut up. Just let him talk.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What instrument did you play badly?
Oh,
You said you played something badly in a band.
Yeah, I played guitar badly. I played piano badly, and I played in some high school bands. I played in a college band guitar. The thing I liked doing more than any was singing.
Okay. So the guitar was an excuse to sing.
Yeah, I just played rhythm guitar. I mean, I
thought
I could keep
thought you
up, but I
played
wasn't
bass
doing
'cause you
anything
worked at
special.
Alembic.
Oh yeah, no, I never did play bass.
Huh.
No, when I played guitar, it was rhythm guitar, and it was just I could keep up, but
So
it was
if
nothing
that was the
nothing memorable.
excuse for singing,
Yeah.
why didn't you? And I don't mean this the way that exactly as it sounds, but why didn't you find your Bruce Springsteen connection where it was like, I'm going to use this medium, but I'm really just going to say what I have to say?
I don't know. I lack of talent is probably the top thing.
No, that's not true. Because your voice was a different voice.
Yeah.
You know, everybody
And-
wants to be the lead singer. Everybody wants to grab the guitar and sing it, but some guys got to play the keys. That wasn't your path.
Right,
You know,
right.
your path was a different. I want your job. You know, you're
Right.
doing incredible things. So it's
Yeah,
not a lack
You
of
are
talent.
more of a curator, maybe.
Yeah, I think. What I'm mainly doing in my job now that Radio Silence is on hold is writing full time for the first time in a while, and that's really. I think it was more that when I was playing music and loved doing it, you sort of have to pick at some point
Yeah.
where you're putting your chips, and I loved it, and I wouldn't have minded doing more of it or getting back to it, and maybe at some point I'll get back to it and do more of it, but. Really writing and literature. I studied poetry in undergrad and fiction in grad school, and writing was really where it was at for me. So I think that's why I went in that route. It's like a lot of people. It was all inspired by a great teacher. That's why I fell in love with it.
Who's that person?
Her name was Nan Faraday. She's a high school teacher that got me into it. I was a jock, and I met her at the right time when I was. I think it was ending my freshman year of high school, and I was voted most changed in my high school because I went from a jock to a long-haired poet by the end of high school, and I just sort of found what I wanted to go do, and I went on to college to study literature.
You still got a cannon for a right arm, though?
No, I was always a shitty baseball player. I was
Oh,
a
yeah.
basketball player.
Oh, okay. What do you drop step? What's your move?
Well, the thing, I'm 6'4", which in high school means you're a center or
Yeah.
power forward. It means at every other level you just suck. You're just a
Yes.
slow, shitty
Right.
guard who doesn't have good ball handling skills and can't shoot.
You can't shoot, right?
So,
yeah.
here's
my sky
you
hook.
have that moment in middle school and high school where
SWAT.
everyone's like, "Oh, look at the size of that guy," and you don't have any ball skills. You're just bigger than the other kids in middle
Right.
school and high school.
Right.
And then you get to college and you're nothing.
And everybody catches up with size.
So you just
yeah,
turn around,
yeah.
bounce the ball off the square, it goes in the rim, and you run to the other end of the court.
Pretty much.
Until
You just-
some dude who's 6'8" says, "No, you don't."
Yeah. You just elbow people.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're Barkley,
Yeah.
you just elbow people down under for the ball. And I mean, I'm the same height as Steph Curry.
Right.
I can't do anything that Steph
No.
Curry. I can't even do
Yeah.
one part of his warm up.
Yeah.
I never have been able to. And I
Right.
went to basketball camp every summer. I mean, I was way into it and still am. I'm a
Yeah.
big fan of basketball and baseball. But baseball I never played on a serious level. Basketball I tried to, and just didn't have the skill.
Well, I'm going to say that it's great that you got most changed, and for a lot of people, they can make that connection. But I'm going back to the masculinity of literature and saying, no, I don't think that's that much of a change. I think that's just that you found the vehicle that was right for you and a place where you could have your brand of masculinity without having to be defined by, success in a sport that you weren't as good at as you were tall.
Right.
So, there.
Yeah.
Good enough for me.
Indeed.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, really enjoyed it, guys. Thanks for having me.
So you'll do this again? Next time,
Absolutely.
maybe
Yes.
at Dr. Bob's house with martinis?
And I'll set that up.
That would be great. I'll bring my polar bear.
Terrific.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.